Thank you very much, Gareth, Liz, and the team, and GSD for inviting me today to share my ideas together. I hate to be the last one to present. I know everybody's tired. I'm tired too. I would like to be to explain as brief as possible. Dubai is not, many Dubai officials and leaders, clients are not shy of being spectacle or extravagant. This might not be viewed as a negative thing, but as a positive vehicle for a competitive market economy. And in many RFPs that I receive as a practicing architect, to design something unique, iconic, usually you see it in the RFP that you receive as a kind of mandate. And I think it's really interesting, this reduction of complexities and complex tasks to do, like designing a city, into a simple, reduced, recognizable, identifiable to market it also. I think this is a very genius Dubai invention. Yet what gave really fame for Dubai and maybe success in a way, it's brought a lot of also stress and Dubai somehow doesn't really work as a city, but as a kind of introverted zones, which the way that these zones has been made is that every client or developer is in charge of a piece of the city and is completely, shall we say, kept away from the public or even authority or competitors till it's been marketed and announced. So it is actually a result of trying as much as possible to keep information and to be, shall we say, concealed and not to share information. But unfortunately, it's resulted to this fascinating, maybe fortunately also, this fascinating kind of master plan. To correct that, many attempt is really happening to glue the city again and make it flow as much as possible and try to connect the city again, by public and also by vehicle, by pedestrian and vehicle. And again, design has been used to provide that solution. But unfortunately, what is really kind of maybe designed very well technically, I mean, the plants are really beautiful. The pathway, it's carefully set. I think it's a beautiful image, but it's not working because there are no understanding of either the environment or the context that these designs has to serve. Again, as you see here, chairs are carefully placed toward the highway or toward the streets. Pathways and green spaces lined. But what is really common in this beautiful image is that they are spooky and there are no people in it. Again, as beautiful as this, you imagine when you are in a desert, maybe oasis is kind of a place where you want to be in. But it's really, I think, a naive thought. To provide a green space, a beautiful space like that, not necessarily is the solution to connect and encourage pedestrian movement in the city. Again, as you see in the reduction of that map to its only green spaces, it follows the Dubai municipality ambition to make Dubai green, and by that is beautiful and working, but actually it follows the logic of the districts and the plans and the master plans that is within, so it stays really not connecting tissues, but segregated within certain communities. Usually these kind of pocket of well or carefully designed kind of a landscape introduced in the city to make it more to encourage residents to interact inside that piece of land. And many of the designers and professionals operating, especially in Dubai, is coming from the Western world, and their perception of what is beautiful, what is beauty, recreation, free time is completely different than our understanding. And to have a picnic and enjoy a certain landscape, the idea that it could be duplicated in another culture, and only you have to keep the technicalities for the grass not to dry or the plant not to die, and so on. Again, this is in Dubai. This is Mashraf Park in Mirdif. Again, a perception of what is a park, also what could be a park, define the park, and a place to really where kids can go over the bridge or also be around the stream of water, but it's in the middle of the desert, has been enforced almost from the designers. Again, this obsession also of controlling activities. Fencing is seen as a way to keep certain class away from these spaces, controlling it. So you need to behave in a certain way. You need to be from a certain class, certain income, doing certain activities within that zone. And the whole idea of maybe fencing it is to whatever does not really fit the image that the city want to perceive for its residents, it will be kept away from that spaces. Again, surveillance, and this is really spooky, saying al-udhun al-saghiya, which is the listening ear. So somebody is really always listening and watching, and in these spaces you can't smoke, you can't do cycling or roller skating, or many even bringing your pet. Simple picnic or barbecue is not allowed. So by these kind of rules and regulations, you are limiting really the people who are using these spaces, and also limiting their behaviors and controlling their what they do in these spaces. Timing is very restricted also. I mean, I like the idea of bringing the cities are cooler than the desert in the Arabian. I mean, this is really the first time I hear this information. It's interesting, but water is the biggest problem that we have in the Arab world, or especially in the Gulf. We consume 15 liters per square meter daily, and this is the shall we say, top consumption per capita in the whole world. And many of these used for irrigation and beautification. Again, the image of Dubai is very important. I mean, when you market yourself and you try to sell, you have to be really careful of any unpleasant or unwanted image that might come from the inhabitants, the people who live there, the residents, the locals. So total control is very important in cities. And it's a trade between freedom and we give you services. So if you want to really be in these zones, enjoy your beautiful house, streets, and so on, maybe it's a trade-off against freedom and other things. What's interesting for me, the whole focus, and this is the map of the UAE, excluding the cities, or at least the major cities. And what we realize that it's a huge piece of desert, and where the urban intensity is happening is really a small percentage of that total plain. And the highways is used to connect between these centers, between Abu Dhabi and all the 7 Emirates, as a kind of a way to encourage economy, connectivity, and so forth. And what us as maybe us as say residents of Dubai or also a local of Dubai, the way we used to perceive space, and it's a bit more different than maybe the West or even the East. I mean, this is a wonderful kind of space sitting on the sand, which is very clean and cool and so forth. And here were many of early pictures of leaders, for example, like Sheikh Zayed and Sheikh Rashid, or meet residents or plan for their future. They actually sit on that kind of space and maybe even do sketches on the sand to plan the future. And many early, I mean, the Bedouins refused to shift to the cities, and they always understood the freedom of mobility. And many houses actually built in the early 60s and 70s tried as much as possible to encourage the Bedouins to settle and to have a kind of a specific fixed point. And many of the text written at that period of time was mentioning is very important to have the Bedouins settle down to create so-called civil space or civilization. Again, the opportunity to, this is Sheikh Zayed Road, the opportunity to connect to the desert is a missed opportunity. I think now the city is working like ecology by itself, separated from the desert, or separated from its natural surroundings. What I think is beautiful, these maybe unplanned highways that cuts through the desert. The car that is hated maybe by many urbanists or by many people who like the city to be more pedestrian. The street light, which is completely a simple piece of technology, created a really interesting phenomena, which I'm coming to explain now. I mean, the highway is a piece of infrastructure that is meant to be utility, connecting function A to function B. It's never meant to be a space or a place, more accurately. And this kind of unlovable, maybe, a piece of pathway is being used completely as an opportunity in a different way to be access to that enormous and large space that consists the UAE. And this is a picture where you see this is not necessarily camping. Many people actually, after the sunset, they start to gather around the highway and start to really create their own spaces. And the car is becoming an important element where people are starting to create their own zone, the way they like to make it happen. And if I always say, if I want to meet my many locals or Emiratis or do businesses, I will not go to shopping mall. I will not go to any place. I'll go to the desert. And actually, I make business not by playing golf, but by really going to the desert. And as you see, many kind of locals sit in this wonderful organization and defined by their cars for some kind of privacy. And then speaking of culture, politics, and business. This is a famous singer called Abdallah Bilkhair, which you can find him almost everywhere in the desert, and he gets stuck often. And they have to really come and rescue him. But this is really a true beautiful space because you meet such a people that you don't have an opportunity to meet them maybe in a shopping mall or in other places. I mean, creating your own space it's something that is. Technology is not necessarily viewed as a negative thing. Maybe, I mean, you say, okay, if you can make a fire here, why you are making, bringing lights? But people really enjoy these technologies, and they're not necessarily looking for a kind of polished quality, but this informal sitting is more interesting for them, where they can make their own space and speak any subjects they want. I mean, they're much smarter than us, the people who sell products for us. And Nissan understood this association or love to the car. And car is people, especially young people, really look at their car as a kind of extension of themselves and an enabler. It enables them to reach many places. So the Nissan has introduced the desert camel power. The street light. It's really interesting that many people are choosing to stay close to the road. And it's very convenient. The street light provide a kind of a hazy quality of light where families could really sit comfortably without being recognized from the people who are driving. So you see a lot of gender mix in that kind of places. If you like a few meters away from the road, if you can create your own space or actually be along that space. Again, this simple phenomena sometimes becomes really an interesting space, and you see people really along the street, they start to camp. Again, I think I will stop soon. But the further you go deeper to the desert, you have different qualities of light and different settings, and even different group of people using these spaces. You are allowed to smoke shisha or anything in the desert in a completely informal way. You are allowed to express your insane qualities and enjoy other people expressing that also. Being alone or also watching. I mean, people maybe they don't want to stay away from their TV. I mean, but really sitting and creating your own space and intervening and making a kind of a space that's suitable for you. This is a very interesting phenomenon. I mean, these guys are making their own movie. Maybe they cannot do it in the city because of regulation and you have to take approvals and so forth. Also, the deeper you go away from the linear spine of the light, the more even activities changes in behavior. And you see this kind of a group of activities, different activities happening when you really come closer. I mean, designed to maybe attract you while you are driving in the desert. Even simple petrol stations becomes an interesting meeting point and kind of a place to exchange and meet others. I mean, it will be interesting. I mean, this is, I would see it as a beginning of maybe a research to maybe investigate how people are starting to freely occupying the landscape and creating their own comfort zone within that space, and how that is really shaping again the city of Dubai. Thank you very much.